Try to leave Thursday night or Monday and see what happens. July got hit with the fire truck.
Additions is going
Memorial
to be
Day,
G.
something else was going on. I can't keep up. This year has been rough. Try again in 2025.
I realize it's 6:02. Can you hear me?
Birthday. Is this
We're going to be another minute. We have an item that needs to be added to the agenda. It's for a Labor Day parade walk. So we're just going to grab that. Is that better, Terry? We're going to grab that, add it to the agenda, and then we'll get started. So if you'll just give us one more minute, I would appreciate it. Talk amongst yourselves.
This bit didn't break the skin.
Sheriff Swanson is asking us, do we need police to close a road and to, I don't know, to
That was
Brad?
last night.
Do they need escort from the police department?
I don't believe so.
Okay. It's for Labor Day.
I was only
Why?
consulted because they just wanted to know who to contact. So that's kind of how I know about it.
Sheriff would take care of all that.
I would think the sheriff department would handle all that, yeah.
Yeah.
Gene's right.
Hmm?
Or the sheriff department, if it's their walk, would be the ones that handle all that, take care of it.
The access.
I don't know if I have that in my email.
Catch a cold.
Feels
Like,
me too.
yeah, I'm like,
Up here?
nose is running.
Yeah. Me too.
Oh, now I got nothing in the Wi-Fi.
Sorry I created those.
It's all your fault.
Yeah. All I did was find it.
This is double-sided.
Got in here early to try
And we're saving paper. You want single-sided? Or single pages? You can't follow it when it's double-sided.
I know, I saw you pull in. I was pulling back in. I was like, she's here early.
Thanks.
I was like, I'm not going to tell her.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good thing you reminded me, Brad.
And then I heard you were off. I'm like, oh crap.
Well, and that came in.
Are we ready, you guys?
The day before the election.
You ready down this end?
And I
G?
forgot about it last week when I came in.
This is G.
Yeah, it's going to be G.
Item G.
What? I saw this map in there. What is that? I saw
They're
it.
gonna close the road on their own.
You ready this way?
They're trying to.
At the
Yes?
very back.
Yeah, they're trying to go.
Yep.
You ready?
Yep.
You ready down this way?
No, that's not.
Barb, Carol, yes? I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you'd please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to Thank you. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Trustee Fabdo?
Present.
Trustee King?
Present.
Trustee Leverett?
President.
Trustee Burt?
Yes, President.
Clerk Triplett here. And Supervisor Miller? Here. Treasurer Clee?
Present.
Thank you.
We have an addition to the agenda this evening. It is an application for a permit to the Road Commission, but it is for the office, it's from the Office of Genesee County Sheriff's Department to allow a police escorted parade on Monday, September 2nd, this year from 11 to 1 p.m. The route will start at the Bristol Road Church of Christ at 1315 West Bristol Road, traveled to Vance Lake. So resolved that, so I don't see a name here, but it's a walk, right? Sheriff's Department. So that will be action item G, Labor Day walk, Sheriff Swanson's department. Any other additions or deletions? Tom, did you
Oh.
Just for the record, because it's not in the
Because not in the
original
packet,
packet.
yes. Just so everyone knows, we handed out to you folks the bills, disbursements, and transfer from to the Genesee County Waste and Water just before the meeting. It was, it didn't get printed when everything was printed or added to the agendas. It was in the agenda, it just didn't get, for some reason, it didn't come through back to back, as Barb said, and others, so here it is.
Alrighty. Are there any, thanks, Tom. Are there any corrections to the minutes of the July 15th meeting? Any corrections to the minutes? No? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from July 15th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those stand approved. We move on to public comment. If you would like to address the board, I'd ask that you come to the podium and give us your name. You don't need to give us your address. And you'll have 4 minutes to address the board. Tracy, can you take the time, please?
Yeah, I can.
Go ahead.
My name is Brian Hughes. I live at 1137 South Dye Road. I want to talk about a number of items concerning blight, livestock, chickens, and building permits. All these things need to be enforced by code enforcement or building inspectors. We have buildings going up without any building permits. We have chickens and ducks sitting at the corner of Court and Dye Road today. We just had an ordinance that was approved at the last meeting that they need to be penned up. And I believe it's disrespectful for the neighbors and a slap in the face to this board that people just do as they please. And you guys are working to try to provide the things that they're asking for, and they just disrespect you to no end. I know there's one or two that fought hard for this chicken ordinance, and look what they do to you after the fight that you had to go through. Very disrespectful. What I would like to ask is that we have a court enforcement or a building inspector come into these meetings and give a report on the violations that they find each and every month. That way, the township knows that it's being policed, and you don't have your neighbors telling on neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to address the board?
Hi, I'm John Ballman, and I'm the head of the Neighborhood Watch on West Court Street. And my wife addressed the meeting last month and about in reference to Crazy Lady at 4161 West Court. And nothing so far has been done that we see about her being moved. And we were told a year ago she would be moved. And John Chiza and a lot of the officers have worked with us on multiple issues, but I talked to Brad earlier, and he's going to follow up on it with his supervisors. And I brought pictures tonight to show, and Mark is going to take, Mark took those, and he's going to address those. We're mainly worried about the safety of the ones in the neighborhood. We have two little girls across the street, and they say if you see something, say something. And they're doing their chalk arc in their driveway, not bothering anybody. And when they do, she comes out with her club and just rocks at the end of her driveway with her club. And I don't know what she's thinking, but I don't want any little kids hurt. And she shouldn't be there. She should be in a mental institution. So we don't know where to go next or what to do. But Brad's going to follow up on it. She's driving a car. You can only see this much out of the windshield. The rest is a hoarder's mess. And so, I don't know, are you going to follow up with the police, or do I need to call them or something? You're going to follow? Okay. So hopefully we're moving down the road, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board?
Good evening, Township Board. I'm John Whiteside. I'm a member of the Road Advisory Committee, and I'm speaking on behalf of just myself because it is a public comments, and this is my opinion. The original road millage passed was for 2006 to 2015. It was renewed in 15 for another 10 years. In this past election on the 6th, it was renewed again by the township residents. It passed by 70%. That's 3,701 yes and 1,599 no. Myself, as a member of the Road Advisory Committee, I wanted to thank the citizens of Flint Township for renewing that, a very important millage. As a member of the committee, I work along with the other members of the Township Road Advisory Committee, the Township Supervisor, the Genesee County Road Commission, and our advising engineer to come up with the best road plan that we can come up with for the dollars that we have. We work very hard to formulate a plan that will best use the township dollars that is given for the road millage. We are only advisory committee. The Township Board has ultimate decision. So by renewing and passing this in a 70% favor in these trying times, I find it demonstrates the confidence that the citizens and residents have in the Road Advisory Committee and the work that we do. I want to thank everybody for supporting this very important millage. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? No? Alrighty, so we will move on to the presentation of the audit. That's it's not exactly under public comment, but anyway. We have Pam Hill and Christopher Gilbert from Plant Moran. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us here this evening. We're here today to present the results of the audit for the December 31st, 2023 fiscal year end. You should have in your packets the financial statements, the end of audit letter, and we will kind of go through those documents at a high level here really in the graph presentation. So, but happy to answer any questions that you might have as we go through. Before we get into some of the details of the numbers and some of the trends, I just wanted to maybe give a brief overview of the audit process this year. So the audit process was a little bit more time this year for a couple of reasons, but the main reasons are there were some significant new accounting standards that the township had to adopt this year, as well as some significant new auditing standards. Those auditing standards required us to take a deeper dive into internal controls, as well as looking at the IT components related to internal controls. So it's a lot more work for us, but then also your team as well. So did want to definitely thank Mr. McIntyre, Supervisor Miller, Clerk Triplett, and Treasurer Klee. We really appreciate all your support throughout the process, all the help you and your team gave Kevin. I know it took a little bit longer this year, so thanks for sticking with us and helping to push it over the finish line. So appreciate that. With that, we did provide an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. So that's the highest level of assurance you can receive. And basically what it means is you can rely on those numbers as you see them within the statements. So I'll turn it over to Chris, let him give a little bit high level, and then I think when he's done, I'm going to cover some of the other results in the end of audit letter. So Chris. Yes.
All right, thanks Pam. So I'm going to take the 70 or so pages of the financial statements, and we're not going to go through all of those tonight, of course, but we have a few slides prepared just looking at the numbers at a high level. So starting with your general fund and in particular revenue. So we always like to do a little trend analysis. So this is looking back 5 years and just seeing where it's trended by category over the past 5 years. So these are numbers as of your fiscal year end, and the most recent would be December 31st, 2023. So as of December 31st, 2023, total general fund revenue was just about $14.3 million. And of course, a big piece of that, you have a few major revenue sources. Property taxes, of course, would be one of the larger ones, and that was just over $4.4 million in 2023, which millage rates did not change. It's more of a function of taxable values in the township being up a little bit. The next largest revenue source would be your state revenue, which is primarily your state revenue sharing from the state. And that was just over $4 million for the year. I did want to point out in this specific category, there was a pension grant this year received to get your MERS pension plan to the 60% that the state is wanting. So that was an additional 400,000 in revenue during the year. And if you look at last year's number, that was a little higher too. And if you remember, you had a $1.1 million grant from the state to help with some road projects. So special assessments is also one of the larger sources. So that was about 2.2 million in 2023. Your two main special assessments would be your garbage and streetlights, but you also now have the road projects that are starting to come in, which is why the last few years are a little higher. And then federal revenue is the category here in green. And that in particular was just over $1 million in 2023. You'll notice the last 2 years that's substantially increased, and that's related to the ARPA funds that you've received. So you've received the money up front, but then as the township applies that to eligible expenditures, that is recognized as revenue in your general fund. So that's a big piece of why the revenue is up the last 2 years. If you look at the last 5 years, you're at about 14 million in 22 and 23, whereas before you were at the 10 to 11 million dollar range. So we'll come back to that in just a minute. Other revenue, that category's up a little bit this year. That's mostly due to you had some insurance recoveries and then you had sale of township properties. And then all of the other revenue categories were pretty consistent over the last few years. So kind of to put things into perspective, without that one-time ARPA revenue the last couple of years, and then the additional state grants that you've received, your revenue would be closer to the 11.5, 12 million range, which is more consistent with 2021. So I just want to keep that in perspective. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides as well, but just wanted to keep that in perspective. So this next slide is same information, just looking specifically at 2023, but just in a pie chart. So it's more or less looking at the revenue and what categories you have and what percentage that is of your total general fund revenue. So again, property taxes, of course, is at 31%, which is your largest source. State revenue is at 28%, and then the other categories, obviously special assessments, about 15%. But same information here, just looking at it a little differently. So now we'll look at your general fund expenditures. Same concept here. So in 2023, general fund total expenditures were just under 13 million. With that being said, public safety remains the highest category by far at about 60% of your total general fund expenditures. And it's continued to increase over the past few years. I will note general government and public works were basically where the remaining expenditures are, and general government has been relatively consistent over the last 5 years. And then public works has fluctuated a little bit, but that's obviously depending on what projects you're doing in a given year. So of course, the road projects over the last few years has been the main, fluctuation there. All right. Same theme here, really, general fund expenditures, but looking at it in a pie chart. So same concept here, public safety, just under 60% of your total expenditures. General government, around 24% of your total expenditures, and public works, 16%, and so on. So we're kind of taking all of that and piecing it together here and just seeing what impact that's had on your fund balance over the last several years. So here on this slide, we have your annual revenue and expenditures, and then looking at your fund balance for the general fund. So I will say that fund balance has increased over the past few years to 4.8 million, but again, one thing I want to note is that that's mostly because of the federal and state grants that you've received over the last couple of years. So as I mentioned previously, you had ARPA of 1 to 2 million over the last 2 years each. You had additional state expenditures or state grant funds. You had some insurance recoveries, some one-off items that make make it look a little larger than it is. So if you look back to 2019 to 2021, that's really more indicative of where your normal revenue streams were at, which is closer to the $11 million range. So with that being said, your general fund balance did decrease to about 2.5 million in 2021. So without all of the federal grants and state grants over the last few years, you'd be closer to around 2 million approximately.
The only other thing I was just gonna add related to that too, and I do believe on the 2024 budget that you passed, you did pass a budget to use fund balance of about $620,000, somewhere around there. So I think to kind of Chris's point, you had a few one-time revenues. You've been able to keep your operational expenses pretty about as close to even as possible, especially given the inflation that we've been seeing. And these one-time revenues have really been able to bump you up a little bit, but from operationally, you know, those are just one time, right? So they're not gonna be here next year or going forward. So it is important to just watch that. One of the things that I know we spent a lot of time talking about is the capital needs of the township, how you plan to fund those, and looking at kind of some long-term planning and forecasting, just to ensure the fiscal sustainability of the township, as you do look at some operational type deficits as you look forward to the future. So, thankfully, you did get the ARPA dollars, and you were able to use a good portion of them for operational, which is why you're kind of seeing that increase. So, just wanted to point that out about the budget for next year, or I guess this year's almost over at this point, but the budget for the fiscal year 24 that you're in.
All right, transitioning over to the Police and Fire Millage Fund, just for a brief moment. So annual revenues and expenditures have been relatively consistent overall with continued increases over the last 5 years. Annual expenditures have slightly exceeded annual revenues relatively consistently, resulting in total fund balance trending down over the last 5 years. So as of December 31st, 2023, the total in that fund was about $752,000.
And I think one thing to point out, and I know you're all aware, but as you go through the budget process for 25, just keep in mind, and Chris pointed it out, I think on the pie chart a couple slides ago, the general fund really does fund the majority of police and fire. So this police and fire millage is covering what, 3.6 million. The general fund's still paying 7.7 million. So, you know, if you have a total budget of 10 point whatever, this is only covering about a third of that through the millage. Otherwise, it's state shared revenue and general operating millage that's still covering public safety. So it is a little deceiving when you look at the two funds separately as opposed to combined, but I just wanted to make sure to point that piece out.
All right, moving along to sewer and water. So similar theme here, just looking at the last 5 years and where your revenue and expenses were in these funds. So with these funds, generally the fees are intended to cover the costs of these funds as they're meant to be self-supporting. So in 2023, total revenue was about $15.5 million, and then total expenses were about $14.5 million. So we also include unrestricted net position on this slide and cash balances just for comparison here. So as you can see in the yellow tan line, unrestricted net position represented about $13.7 million, which is about 90% of your total net position. So the remaining 10% of your net position would be your net investment in your capital assets or your infrastructure. So usually we would see the reverse of that, obviously. Your net investment in capital assets usually make up the most of your net position. So this just means that your infrastructure is just nearly fully depreciated and continues to age. So I know that's something management is aware of. We've mentioned in the past, and just something to continue to be aware of as you continue to plan for infrastructure going forward. So we're going to close these last few slides talking about legacy costs with your pension and OPEB plans. So this first one in particular is specifically for the firefighters' pension plan. So the fire pension plan, the net pension liability at year end at December 31st, 2023 was $2.5 million, and that was about 76% funded. So if you were to look 2 years ago, you'd notice you made great progress and got it to 90% funded. Unfortunately, the market took a downturn last year, so you took a little bit of a hit, but you can see in 2023, you've been able to recover a decent way back to get to that 76% funded. But just again, keeping in mind that this is really a snapshot at a point in time. So moving along on the right way, you're above that 60% threshold that the state wants you at, and again, moving in the right direction. So to contrast that, so you have the MERS plan as well for the rest of the township employees. So that plan was at December 31st, 2023, the net pension liability was just over 20 million. And one thing I wanted to point out is that this plan is on a 1-year lag, just that's common for all local units. So really these numbers are a year behind as of December 2022 because of that. So just keep that in mind in theme with that snapshot at a point in time. So with that being said, you'll notice a big dip this year in the percent funded. You were at about 54% funded at year end, but that was mostly because of that's where the market was at in 2022. We already know that the market came back around in 2023. So you should see it come back around to where it was previously, and you also got that $400,000 pension grant, which because of the year lag, that doesn't hit until next year. So that'll be reflected in next year's numbers when we present those, just as a heads up. And then just finishing out with your OPEB plan. So at year end, at December 2023, that plan was about 9% funded, which had a net OPEB liability of about 14.7 million. This plan in particular, that's up 2 percentages from 7% in the previous year. And if you look back 5 years ago, you were at about 2%. So that is, obviously we know the OPEB liability isn't quite funded where the pension plans are, but we do know that the state's been more concerned, of course, with the pension funding, but OPEB is definitely something everyone's dealing with and struggling to fund. But again, you're working through this and getting in the right direction, of course, getting that up from where it's been in the last several years. And just looking at where you've come from over the last 5 years, I think is great progress. So again, just wanted to point out that this is as of a point in time, and the township has been continuing to focus and working on funding these legacy costs that are ongoing.
Yeah,
Anything
and
else?
really, I mean, for retiree healthcare, once the passage of PA 202, I believe it
Yes.
was, you're required to get it up to, 40% funded. So you are working towards the plan that you have submitted to the state in order to reach that funding. So it's one of those things that'll take a while, right, to get to that funded, but you're making progress.
So at some point, back in 2012, we offered optional program for retirees that you could, if you were, well, it was when they retired, but if you were a current active employee, you could opt into the retirement healthcare savings plan. But that was optional. We have since negotiated, I don't know, it was before COVID. It's now, everyone receives that. We no longer have in the contracts, or anybody in this township will receive health care when they retire. So those who started working before we made the change will get it. We have a lot of retirees who receive the health care. But going forward, as of the last, I don't know, maybe you guys can help me.
Think about 3 years now or so.
It's
Yeah.
mandatory, so that eliminates that legacy cost. So at that point, this should reflect in this graph, in the reality of us not owing all that money. We won't have that liability as we go down the line, correct?
Yeah, what will happen is, as kind of members of the plan are no longer participants in the plan, you will start to see a drop off. But, so that's just gonna depend on the age of the retirees. So usually what we see is in a closed plan like yours, it can take 30 to 50 years for that plan to be fully closed. So you will eventually see this be zero, but it's going to be kind of a long-term, a long game from that perspective.
Okay.
But that definitely has an impact from a long-term perspective, because there is an end. It's just that the end is quite a ways out. So I did want to also briefly cover just a couple items in the end of audit letter. So this would be the kind of just a couple page document that you would have in your packet. There are a couple items, as I mentioned, we did have to perform additional procedures and do some additional looks and testing related to internal controls this year. We did have some recommendations related to internal controls. The township has actually done a really nice job when you switched your kind of legacy computer general ledger system. You did enact quite a few good checks and balances when you enacted the new software system. So that was really great to see. I think just with a smaller office, it's always good to look at the, segregation of duties and make sure you have those rights, checks, and balances. So we do have a few recommendations in here related to kind of segregating some of those duties. I know we spent a lot of time talking to management about what that might look like in trying to ensure that there's some preventative controls in place. I do think the township has done a nice job with the small staff that you do have in trying to enact a lot of detective controls, which is really good, right? So if something were to happen, you have kind of those back end controls, but it's always good to have the preventative that kind of like stops it from ever even occurring. So we talked a lot about that, and I think had some good recommendations that things that might be able to be implemented going forward. Also, on page 3, there were a couple items that we noted just related to non-compliance with laws and regulations. So the township is needing to file a couple plans with the state related to these items and how they're going to be corrected, mainly related to budget amendments, and then also the requirement to remit property taxes to other taxing authorities within a certain window. There was like a 1 month period where that window, it was outside of that window. So nothing huge, but just something that needs to get reported back up to the state, and then just ensuring that the processes are addressed to make sure that those don't happen in the future. And then on page 5, we already covered this, so I'm not going to go into any detail, but just to make sure to point you there if you haven't had a chance to read it. We did kind of provide a brief summary on the general fund financial condition, which I know Chris covered in detail, and then also the water and sewer fund financial condition, and just kind of trying to put a broader perspective on long-term projections for those funds and ensuring that you kind of look outwards, just because we know there's obviously a lot of aging infrastructure at the township. So looking at how that will be impacted when you make different decisions and what the long-term impact on those decisions will be. And then lastly, at the end of the letter, we have quite a bit of information just on some legislative items and other things that we're really seeing affecting our clients. Of course, some new accounting standards, but we won't go into those tonight. That will be for Kevin to enjoy. But we did, I don't think I could leave without at least mentioning cybersecurity. I mean, that's just something that is everywhere you look, right? And so continuing to make sure that that's a priority at the township. I know that's always a discussion item, but one of the things I've really been focusing on with my clients is, as you head into your next budget season, really looking to see what you have budgeted and what you have set aside for cybersecurity. If you don't have anything budgeted, that's probably a big red flag right there. So really taking that into account. I know doing a risk assessment over just your cyber in general has been something a lot of my clients have started to do, because they said, all right, well, if I can afford X, whatever that dollar amount is, what would I spend it on, right? So the first thing we suggest is doing some type of risk assessment to say, well, where are my risks, so that I know where to properly spend my money if I do have extra money in the budget. So something to definitely think about and consider. I know you're continuing to look at that at the township, but just something that we continue to talk to our clients about. I know we all personally see it on our own accounts all the time, But it probably is something that is never going to go away in terms of, a threat to all businesses, really, so.
We meet monthly with our IT providers, both chiefs and Lieutenant Van Lente and Kevin McIntyre. We can ask them to provide a report to the board on their security efforts. I know when we renewed the contract, they let us know, but just to bring everybody up, especially
Yeah.
in light of what's going on
Yes,
with the
Social
hospitals
Security
and
numbers, yeah.
other municipalities.
Yeah, it's a huge breach right now. So that's not going anywhere. It's just going to keep happening. So just continuing to be diligent, seeing where they're spending their money, and then ensuring that they have all the right, controls in place just to protect you. Any questions? I guess that was all we had prepared to talk about.
No, Barbara, Carol, do you have any questions? Greg? This way? No? Tom? No? Thank you very much. I know it took a long time, a very long time.
Yeah, we appreciate everything. We, really appreciate you as a client. And you know how to reach us if you guys ever need anything. We're always happy to come back, talk to the board, or whatever you need. So, thank you.
Well, thank you to you, and thank you to our controller, Kevin McIntyre, who does a really good job. And I know in working with you guys to provide the information so that you guys can look into it, that's just added work. I know that we've got the F-65 filed. You guys file with the state also, do you? Or
We upload all of your stuff to the state. Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So that's all filed and squared away. We're good.
Done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we move on to reports. I had a few things. One, you'll see that we have catch basin repair on our list, or on the agenda. And so I can talk about the catch basins, but I want to remind everybody, as I drive around, I see debris in the catch basins. Whether that's grass or trash or leaves or twigs, the best way to prevent any problems with flooding, whether that's in your yard or down the street or in your basement, is to make sure it's not your responsibility, but it's good if you, in front of your house, if you have a catch basin, to make sure that that's free of debris. I wanted to say thank you to John Whiteside for your comments on, first of all, you serve as a secretary on the road advisory, and you've done that since 2006. That's a lot of community service, and I want to thank you for that. And I agree with your comments about thanking the residents for supporting that road millage. It's not a lot of money. On average, it's about $330,000 a year that we use to repair all the roads in the township. That doesn't include replacing a road, because if you have your road replaced, you're going to do that through a special assessment. And we did 10 commercial special assessments recently, and we're in the middle of a neighborhood special assessment. But we've done a lot of work as far as ditching, as far as road repair. We completed the limestone project in, I think they call it the Bronx. Philip, Tuxedo, Hull. They added limestone, and that was about $70,000, and we did a $26,000 application, which should help alleviate the dust, but also on the dirt roads, when you get a lot of water, and then people go to start and stop, it develops ruts. And we've been told that by applying the Permazyme application, it should alleviate that. So kind of did a pilot project, and we're going to see how that works. And if it does work well, we can look at applying that to other dirt roads. But I'm grateful that the township residents approved the fire equipment millage, which I'm sure you're going to speak on, and the road millage. And we've tried to give a map to show people, have a visual of the areas that we've repaired. And it's not up to date. We'll get it up to date. But not only do we use road millage funds to help repair the roads, we are granted block grant funds once every 3 years, and that's less than $200,000. And we get dollars from the road commission, $50 dollars, so that we can match and stretch our dollars. And all of those decisions, there are recommendations that come from the road advisory, and then it comes to the board for them to approve it. But they do all the preliminary work. The members on the road advisory committee will go out and we receive complaints. We look at areas that need attention. We look at the PACER ratings when we're deciding which road projects we're going to do. And then we have a list that we've compiled, and the list is more than double, triple the amount of money that we can spend on every year. But anyway, we do take the complaints seriously. We try and work our best with the road commission. I just got a complaint about ditching on Dye Road south of 69. And the road commission works very well with us. They do a lot of the maintenance, and if we need additional, we do end up paying for that. But we do try and use the resources to the best of our abilities, make those recommendations to the township board, and the township board approves those projects yearly. So again, I say thank you. Thank you to you, John, and thank you to the residents. I wanted to address the complaint about ducks and chickens. And I'm in the building department all the time talking about the different issues that we have. We work by complaint, and we work by obvious. If there's an issue, we're going to address it. And I'm well aware of what's down the street because I see it when I go home every night, ducks and chickens. So when we look at that ordinance, you have to have at least an acre. It cannot be in a platted or proprietary, did I say that right? Proprietary
Yep.
plat. So you have to be meets and bounds. It can't be on a lot. So all those issues, when the code enforcers see an issue, they have to come back and they have to look that information up, because we just can't say, oh, no. We've got to meet the requirements. And then they go out and they talk to them. There's an NOV. There's a big process. And I know our code enforcers have been busy looking at all that information. And it's not limited to ducks or chickens. There's roosters, there's goats, there's other things, and horses too. Anyhow, we keep our code enforcement department busy, but I know, Mark, you come to the meetings all the time. If you would like to see a report, we can provide that. That would be helpful to the township, because a lot of people, when we get the complaint, think that there's not a lot going on, but it's actually very busy. And we can provide a report the evenings of the meetings. We'll do that. And lastly, I wanted to mention, we had a community servant who passed away, Tim Sneller. His, trying to see, I want to read just a minute of his obituary. He, Timothy Paul Sneller of Burton, Michigan, age 68, passed away on Thursday, July 11th, 2024, and a cremation had taken place. A celebration of life was held last Friday at 3 p.m., August 16th, at the UAW Local 659 on Van Slyke Road. And he served this community, in his own community in Burton, and at the state level for many areas of Genesee County. And I just thought if we could just take a minute and remember him, his life of service, and just have gratefulness in our heart for him being willing to do that, because he gave him a lot of himself. So if we could just take a minute to remember him, please. Thank you. Madam Clerk, do you have a report this evening?
I'd like to report that we had a successful election on August the 6th. I'd like to thank all the election inspectors that participated. We are always looking for new election inspectors. Of course, you'd have to be trained and certified. Classes only is like an hour and a half to 2 hours. But we can't do it without the election inspectors, so we do thank you. And in fact, we have a couple of the election inspectors that have worked over 20 years. There's one young lady that has worked the elections for 47 years. And that's pretty impressive. So, like I said, this is not something we do on our own. It's a lot of help from our deputy, from the people that work in the office with me to make it happen. And so I was very happy about that very successful election. That's it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a lot of work, a lot of work. Mr. Treasurer, do you have a report for us this evening?
Yes, just a couple follow-ups. The interest is starting to show up in and on all actions that we have out there as far as our, the sweep accounts are working, the values are working, our just adjustments in the bank accounts have, we've shown up with several active interest pieces showing up regularly. Also, we're still actively out pursuing past due dollars that are still available. We're actively pursuing what money is there and doing the best we can to collect and bring those past due monies in. And that's all I have for tonight, other than paying the bills in a minute.
Thank you. Are there any trustee reports? This way?
We had another community cleanup. We got 31 bags of trash and 11 workers, and thank you for those that are showing up.
Do you have a next one planned?
I don't know. No, no date, no area. I'll put it out.
Any other reports this way?
I was just going to make a comment that I have been out near the Genesee Valley Mall, and over by Planet Fitness, some of the potholes have been filled in, which makes that part nice. I know they still have some more to do, but at least some of the potholes are being filled in.
It's good to hear.
Anything? On that note, I do know that this board had approved the demolition of Cinema 10, but we've been in conversation with NAMDAR, and our attorney has told us that NAMDAR has signed the demolition contract with the company that we were going to sign with, Bernash Wrecking, and it's a matter of they're waiting on the results of an asbestos survey. Once that's done, we should see some activity taking place at Cinema 10 for the demolition of that building. Thank you, Carol, for reporting on that parking lot. I know that they've been working with the fire chief on the suppression system.
Correct.
And then there's the repeater system that we could look at. But we've been working very hard with police chief, fire chief, building department, our attorney, to try and get this to improve things. Nothing here? Okay. Over this way? Reports? No? All righty, we'll move on to staff reports. Mrs. Tucker, do you have a report this evening?
I don't have a report this evening, but I do have an item on the agenda.
Thank you. Chief Winkler?
Yes, Board, thank you. Somewhat of a longer report for me today. It's been a few weeks since we had the last meeting. Since last board meeting on 7/15, the police department has responded to over 3,000 total calls for service. This includes over 1,900 primary calls and approximately 1,100 backup calls for service. Over this time, there were 35 instances where a single officer responded to over 15 calls in one shift. On July 16th, we responded to I-75 Miller Road for a vehicle parked on the shoulder of the road that was struck by a semi-truck. The 28-year-old occupant of the stalled vehicle was taken to the hospital and is expected to survive. Both lanes of I-75 are closed for several hours for the cleanup of the median wall debris and the reconstruction of the crash scene. We were assisted on scene by the state police and our fire department. On July 19th, we responded to a fatal crash at Beecher and Gilbert Road. Circumstances in this, a vehicle turning southbound onto Gilbert from Beecher was struck by a vehicle traveling westbound in the eastbound lanes. The 25-year-old driver of the offending vehicle was lodged for suspected drunk driving with several prior OWI convictions. The case will be presented to the prosecutor's office once all the results and reconstruction were done on that. Again, assisted on scene by the state police and for the reconstruction and our fire department. During the week of July 29th, 3 of our officers attended a 5-day active shooter instructor training in Lapeer County. This course was hosted by the training consortium led by retired Chief George Sippert. The class was free of charge, taught these particular officers skills that they can now bring back to our department and teach to our officers, and again, hopefully we never have to use these lessons. The lab results were received from the individual that crashed into the fire department's ladder truck on I-75 in Pasadena. This case is now going to be forwarded to the Genesee County Prosecutor's Office for review of charges to include operating while intoxicated. On August 7th, we hosted our 26th annual National Night Out at the police station. By rough estimate, approximately 2,000 people attended. I've been told by numerous people that this was the best event to date. Thank you to everyone that had come out, and I'm very proud of our employees and the event that we were able to provide for our community. Intern Megan Randall completed her internship with our department at the conclusion of National Night Out. This internship was for 240 hours and allowed her to experience patrol, detective bureau, community resource, communications, and evidence. She's a current student at Saginaw Valley State University and will be attending Delta Police Academy in January of 2025, which will complete her bachelor's program. Just a few follow-up items. On August 11th, Grand Lake Township officers were searching for an individual that stole over $60,000 from his mother. Officer Goodman located this man within a few hours, and he was turned over to Grand Lake Township for their investigation. On August 13th, we responded to a personal injury crash at Linden and Flushing Road. A vehicle traveling northbound on Linden Road was struck by a vehicle turning eastbound onto Flushing Road. The 29-year-old female driver was struck in the driver's side door and sustained severe trauma to her left arm. Officer Kyle Appleby quickly assessed her injury and immediately applied a tourniquet to her arm. She was taken to the hospital and was listed in serious condition, again assisted on scene by our fire department. On August 14th, troopers with the Michigan State Police and deputies with the Shiawassee County attempted to apprehend a known felon. He fled from their traffic stop and they terminated their pursuit as it entered Genesee County. He continued traveling on Corona Road at excessive speeds and disregarded several red lights while traveling eastbound. He later crashed into a vehicle at Dutcher Road and fled the vehicle on foot. He was taken into custody by Flint Township officers and an MSP canine. The driver of the vehicle he had crashed into only sustained minor injuries. And just as a final note, while managing these particular highlighted calls I've cited, our officers have recovered during this time period 8 stolen vehicles, 2 of which were taken during armed carjackings, and we made 4 arrests of individuals for carrying a concealed weapon.
Question for you.
Yep.
Do you keep track of the number of volunteers that work on National Night Out?
We do.
Do you? Do you have an idea
Yep.
of?
There were probably, by rough estimate, at least a dozen or better.
And a lot of those volunteers come from your community watch, community engagement meetings.
Programs, right?
Oh, thank you very
Without
much.
them, we couldn't do it.
We thank them, yeah. It was very successful, thank you.
Great.
Chief Beckley.
Thank you. Since the last board meeting, our fire department has responded to 130 incidents. Included in this number are 6 structure fire calls, 3 vehicle fires, and 5 vehicle accidents with entrapments. Right now, year to date, we are at 917 calls for service, which, just as a note, is already past our 2019 total year calls for service. And that was our most recent year there that we met that number. Right now, year to date, we're about 72 calls ahead of where we were this time last year. And I do have a new metric here for the month of July of 2024. We had a total of 115 calls for service for that month, which resulted in a total of 291 apparatus responses from your fire department. So 291 times that month, a fire truck from one of the 3 fire stations was responding to those incidents, or about 9.5 responses per day for a fire apparatus out of our stations. Just a few highlights. On July 18th, we responded to a commercial structure fire call in the evening at Plumsmith Funeral Home on Ballinger Highway. Fire crews arrived on scene to find heavy smoke coming from the upstairs of that building. Fire crews made entry, found a small fire in the upstairs apartment in that building. And luckily, damage was mostly contained to that upstairs area and the garage area in the back, and they were actually still able to hold a service the following day. So good job on that incident. On August 1st, we responded to a commercial structure fire call at McLaren Hospitality House on Beecher Road. Upon arrival, our fire crews were met by a maintenance gentleman who stated there was heavy smoke in one of the mechanical rooms in the building. Luckily, after investigation, it was just found to be a burn-up water circulation pump, so there was very minimal damage, just a lot of smoke to get out of that building. On the morning of August 7th, right after shift change, our on-duty firefighter at Fire Station 3 on Bristol Road heard a loud bang outside of the fire station, looked out and found a 2-vehicle accident directly in front of the fire station. He immediately responded to the fire engine around the corner there to block traffic and assist the patients. One victim was entrapped in one of the vehicles and had to be extricated with the jaws of life and was turned over to EMS on scene. Chief Wengler already touched on the Linden and Flushing incident. On 8/17, just this past weekend, I'm not sure if anybody saw us, but on Lennon Road, right there near Coles, we had the road closed for a couple of hours due to a power pole that was on fire. Consumers Energy arrived on scene, found that the pole was nearly completely burnt through at the top, and asked us to immediately shut down that road until they were able to access and control that pole from breaking off and power lines coming down. And also on the 17th, we responded to a structure fire call in the 1000 block of Royal Crest Drive. The initial callers reported an explosion in the back of the house on fire. Luckily, the homeowner was on site and was able to begin extinguishing the fire on his back deck. And the cause of that fire was a grill that had malfunctioned, causing the propane tank to also explode on his deck. Luckily, there were no injuries. Damage was all contained to the outside of the home, and very minor damage there. As a follow-up to last month, we are working through the hiring process for several on-call firefighter applicants. We should have several ready for the fire academy that begins in October. Right now, we have about 7 applicants that we're working through the hiring process on. Of course, it's a long time before they are hired, trained, and ready to respond, but that is the highest number that we have had in several years in our township, so we are very happy to see that. And as Supervisor Miller stated, just want to thank everyone for the support on the fire equipment millage. That millage is really important to our department, purchases most of our firefighting gear, equipment, fire trucks, all of those things, so that is really an important millage for us. Brings in just about $250,000 a year to the fire department that we otherwise would not have. So just want to say thank you again for the overwhelming support there. As an update to our fire marshal program, I know I've spoke to a few of you recently about this, but ran some numbers this morning on our 2024 stats and where we are. As we all know, we're in a pilot program where this position we are hoping to fund out of our cost recovery and plan review and inspection fees going forward. And so far, our cost recovery revenue in 2024 stands just under $60,000 at about $59,400. Fire inspection fees collected so far year to date are $11,495. Fees that have been billed out but have not been collected yet are about just over $13,600. And again, those fees, if they are not paid by the businesses, they do get certified to their taxes. So we do see a large, portion of that returned to us at some point. So just want to kind of update everybody as a total between cost recovery, fire inspection fees that have been collected, and fees that have been billed but not collected yet. Year to date, we are at $84,544.50 towards that program. So, and I do have one action item on the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Kevin, I know we just had the audit, and you probably don't have a report for us, but I wanted to say thank you again. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I don't have a report, but I do have the corrective action on the item on the agenda.
All right, and once you get situated, you're going to be sending out the worksheets for the 2025 budget, right?
Yeah, that's next. As soon as I finish, like I said, I have the one corrective action done, and then I have like 2 more that I have to complete by the 29th of this month. I'm working on the corrective actions that I will jump right into the budget.
Okay. That sounds great. So I don't believe we have committee reports. We heard from John, but we don't have a report. We'll move on to number 8, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you. Folks, you all have in front of you everyone in front of you has the August 19th statement of the Board of Trustees, payment of the bills. The total of all the bills that we have to pay this pay period is $7,535,229.22. And this breakdown does include bills that follow the billing procedure of the township of $3,451,271.76. Disbursements of $4,083,957.46. As well as included in that is, as always, the transfer to the Genesee County Sewer and Water of $2,282,058.53. And this would be my motion to pay the bills.
Is there a second to the motion?
That's second.
Any questions or discussion on the motion to pay the bills?
I do have one that, invoice number 41-150, candidate form.
You have a question on that?
No, I'm just in total disagreement with that, with paying with the, for a candidate form for an election.
Hear me back here.
It's invoice 41-150 for a candidate form, and that's a bill that I'm disagreeing with. I'm not in agreement with paying that. No candidate form. I don't think residents should have to pay for a candidate to run.
Was that,
Or put
can
the
I ask
information
a
out there.
question?
Sure.
Was that for campaigning purposes?
That was a forum for our residents to see who were running for election. It was a public forum. Everyone who was running in the election for the primary election was invited to attend. And it was recorded by our videographer. It was run by, I don't even know his name. It was run by a man who has a podcast. I guess that's what it is. He did it, and he wanted to make it so everybody could see who was running. So everyone had the chance to be there and talk about their platform. And it was open to the public to see on YouTube. And Terry, was it uploaded to our Venmo account for the public to see?
Terry, question.
So I contacted the attorney when I was contacted to see if we could use PEG dollars, which is for public education and government. We received those dollars from Comcast for that purpose. The attorney said, yes, you could use it for that, so I approved it being recorded for our residents to see. It didn't support one person, one candidate over another. It was a public forum.
I support not paying it. I second.
I'd be voting no tonight because to me that's campaigning and I don't believe the township residents should have to pay for that.
So the attorney wrote an email. Did you print that off for the board? Well, I'll read it since you're bringing this up.
Of course, I'm gonna bring it up if I disagree with the bill.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, this is taking so long. There it is. It attached is correspondence from Attorney Gilner, and I'll read it in regards to this. It's regarding the August 19th meeting. This was sent to me and you, Manya, today. And it says, Dear Mrs. Miller and members of the Township Board, I'm writing to summarize my discussion with Karen Miller and Manya Triplett about the township's ability to pay an invoice from a videographer who recorded a candidate forum. I was told the candidates for all township elected offices were invited to attend a forum where they could introduce themselves and express their views about various township issues before the August primary. I was told that all candidates were invited to participate and that a videographer would record the session and make it available to the public. Based on these facts, I was asked if the township could use PEG funds to pay the videographer. I said that it could. Public funds may only be used for public purposes. Public dollars cannot be used to lobby for or against public officials or ballot issues, but they may be used to inform the public about candidates or ballot questions. Assuming PEG dollars can constitute public funds, I opine that the township could use them to pay the videographer in this case because the forum was designed to educate the people about the candidates and their positions on issues relevant to township voters. Since giving this answer to Supervisor Miller, I spoke with Manya Triplett and Jean Leverett, who questioned whether the video record of the forum was indeed made available to the public. Today, I don't know the answer, but I am based my initial answer on the assumption that the video recording would be available to the general public. To be clear, I never said that the township was obligated to pay this bill. I simply said that it could, under the facts described to me. The question of paying the bill is ultimately within the township board's discretion. If the board finds the candidate forum was for a public purpose, it is within your discretion to pay it. If you find the event does not serve a public purpose, then you should not pay it. And that's from our attorney, Michael Gilner.
Sound like a lot of back and forth. So that's why I took the bill out. I think I discussed it with individuals, one-on-one. But that's why I was against that bill and that check.
So was there a motion on paying that particular bill? Did I hear someone say that?
No, the motion was to pay the bills, but that one was asked to be pulled from it.
And is there a second to the motion?
Second.
That's it.
Any further discussion on paying the bills? This way, no? Madam Clerk, roll call, please, on paying the bills.
Is this to exclude this one?
That's what Trustee Klee just said.
Yeah, it was to exclude.
To exclude this one?
Clerk Triplett, yes. Trustee Fabdahl?
Yes.
Trustee Vert?
No.
We come back to you? Okay. Trustee King?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
No.
Trustee Leverett?
Yes.
And Treasurer Klee?
Yes, we'll pay the bills.
Okay. Let's see, correspondence items. Madam Clerk? Any correspondence items?
I do not have any today,
Well,
no.
The one I gave you today, we passed it out at the table. The letter from Janice Wilson, she sent it to the building department, and then she says she copied Barb Verdon trustees. I'm not sure if you guys received this beforehand, but the letter, did you receive this already? No? It's in opposition to the item A on the agenda. So you have that, and just to note that there were other items that we received previously. I sent that to you. We received a letter in opposition from Mr. Ralph Edwards, attorney. I forwarded that to you before our last meeting. Mr. Ed Dean had some concerns, and this is from, Ed Dean. He had, and Ralph Edwards, they both sent a letter to the Planning Commission. This is dated back at the beginning of the year. So I just wanted to make mention of these people who had sent the township a letter of opposition. I wanted to make sure that you knew that all the letters that were received. So we move on to new business, action item A. Did you want to describe it, Tracy?
Yeah, so this is a little bit different than anything we've had before because it's a conditional rezoning. In this process, the applicant sets out a list of conditions that's basically a contract with the township that they have to fulfill these conditions. This was taken to the Planning Commission. The first time it was, the recommendation from the Planning Commission was not to approve. Then the petitioner re-looked at what the conditions they had, where they talked to some of the neighbors and tried to work with them to come up with some different ways to handle some items. So the conditions were changed. It went back to the Planning Commission last week, and the week before last, and the Planning Commission did do a recommendation of approval with the new conditions. And so now here we are with the new conditions. Let me pull this up and I'll read the conditions to you. And we do have the applicant is here. So the proper, what they're looking at is the C3 for parking only, and it's subject to the following conditions. The property zoning will revert to the original zoning designation prior to rezoning if the project is not completed within 2 years or additional time is granted by the Planning Commission. Site lighting, number 2, site lighting will be shielded from residential property lines. Number 3, Westminster Drive would be used for emergency access only, not to be used for business operations. Number 4, restricted uses of site to surface parking, vehicle storage only, and to not include parking decks. Number 5, off-site property improvements to landscaping, lighting fixtures, surface, and berms, and that's the current parking lot. And then, let's see, number 6, provide a minimum of 40, maximum of 50 residential green belt and landscaping between additional property, adjacent property lines and proposed development, including construction of 8-inch tall berm which meets civil standards. This was in your packet, should have been, okay. Number 7, compliance with all required municipal site planning, state and local civil, environmental, and stormwater regulations and permits. 8, provide adjacent property owners residing on Old Colony Drive with access easements for existing accessory structures. What they're referring to in that is some of the property owners that have bought this property have built structures on this property that doesn't belong to them. So they are addressing that issue. No use of generator-powered light towers other than during construction as needed. And number 10 was R1 Consulting will create and record a legal easement with Genesee County and provide a copy to each resident on Old Colony Drive that is adjacent to the subject parcel. So basically, they are giving them an easement to use the property that would be on the outside of the berm that separates the parking lot to them, so they could use it as their backyards. So, if you have any questions, we have Mr. Williams, right? From General Motors, and Chad McCarthy and Rick Rubio from our own.
So a motion would be in order to move forward.
She said we got any questions from them?
We can't.
Oh.
Until we get to the motion. Then we get to the motion.
Okay, right, go ahead.
No, I can't say.
Anybody can
I'll
make
make
the
a motion,
motion.
move forward. Cleveland support.
So are there any questions or discussion at this point?
I do.
Go ahead.
One is that I have 2 different lists that don't match of what the conditions are or what you propose to do. But anyways, I know at the, first of all, how long have you owned that one on Vance Lake Road next to the cleaners? Sure, right, doesn't matter.
My name is Chad McCarty. I'm one of the owners of R1. We don't own it. We have a 29-year lease agreement on that property. We've been there. We've occupied it for 5 years. And we lease that to an outfit called Precision Vehicle Logistics. Sublease
Okay,
it.
and you said that if this project goes through, you're gonna clean that one up,
Yes.
right? Can I ask you why? Because I heard what GM said, how it's does damage to those brand-new trucks that sit there forever. Why didn't GM pay that in the first place and take care of it? Because it's really bad.
It is bad. I think, I can't speak for General Motors. Matthew might be able to do a better job on that. But I did retire from there, and I was in that department. At the time, that lot was being used for short-term solution, really. When they went through COVID, when they go through launches and events like that, they mass produce these vehicles at the vehicle rate. Sometimes the quality doesn't keep up with the production, and those vehicles overflow to lots until they can get them to the point, that they can ship a good, perfect quality vehicle. Well, we invested in that lot primarily to do a lease of the building to a separate client, but with that additional space, agreed to a short-term lease with General Motors to support a batch and hold and to support quality spills. And then COVID came, and they obviously continued to run, but people weren't shipping quickly, so it developed into an extended situation, and they stayed there longer. And then this recent billion-dollar investment to the assembly plant there, there were some oversights on General Motors' part. They didn't realize how much that addition was going to impact their vehicle storage lot, and it ultimately impacted it by about 35%. So the reason it wasn't done in the beginning is because it was always a short-term play until that final event transpired. Now it's a long-term solution if passed.
First of all you guys know I'm not in favor of this. I've said it from day one, and I'm still not. So, also in the meeting, you guys had mentioned that you're gonna consolidate 4 or 5 of your other off-site wherever they are, where are they? Which ones are gonna be emptied, and is it gonna be
So
permanent?
that's the only location that I have and support General Motors with. Now, I think the plan operationally for General Motors, and Matthew could probably speak about this, that's the only site I have, but I would guess that it would be any of the other local sites they're renting around here, the small sites, little ones. I don't know which specifically, because I don't own or manage those.
Well, it's interesting, because I made a note of that's what you said, that's gonna happen, so.
Yeah, the
make note
goal,
of that.
yeah, I think that was Matthew speaking, yeah.
Right, so, but I wanted to know which ones they were, because I'm interested, the one at the corner of Vance Lake and Bristol. Is that gonna be empty?
Come on up, Matt.
It's just, anybody can answer it. Is that gonna be
I
empty?
think their goal would be to empty that with vehicles, because you consolidate them down, you reduce security fees, you reduce lighting costs, you do all of the above.
Sure.
That one could potentially be, I think their goal would be to primarily access ours, and if possible, perhaps possibly eliminate that one for vehicle storage in the future.
We would eliminate the need from a General Motors perspective for that lot. We didn't tell Precision to purchase that lot.
We can't hear you. If it's possible, if you'd come to the podium.
Come on up,
Okay,
Matt.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what that meant. Oh, I didn't know what that meant.
So we would eliminate the need for General Motors to need that lot. Now, we don't own that lot, and we never told Precision to go buy that lot. They just brought it to us as an opportunity, which sometimes our yard managers will do, depending upon which plant we're talking about. Like, for instance, in Wentzville, Missouri, I have probably 5 or 6 different offsites all throughout the city. And we're trying to do our best in every situation to limit the number of offsites we have and consolidate to what we just need. And that's the reason for this. Now, again, we don't own that facility, or we don't own that property. Precision does, and I've already talked to Precision, and I've said, because I have tried to remain open and transparent, as Chad and Rick have as well, and I've tried to say that my plan is to consolidate into this efficient offsite yard and not operate out of any other ones. Now, I cannot control what they do with their property that they've now purchased. So if they decide to go seek business from someone else to park vehicles there, I can't prevent them from doing that, but I can promise you that I will do everything in my power to hold true to what I've told this board, and that's that General Motors will keep to our on-site facility at the Flint Assembly and this off-site that we are trying to consolidate into. With almost 8,000 spaces in this new one, once we get this, if we're so lucky as to get your approval to move forward, there shouldn't be a need to move off-site. Unless there's some sort of situation with semiconductors where we were parking cars all over the country, everywhere, that's the only type of situation that I can think of that would put us in a position to have to need additional off-site space ever again. And I'm hoping that we don't ever end up in that
Which
situation.
ones are yours, though? Is it the city of Flint off Hemp Hill or Atherton? Is it the ones at the airport? Is it what?
The airport would be one. I'm relatively new to this role, and so I'm not like, I don't have all of right off the top of my head, all the locations. I'd be happy to look them up for you. I'd be happy to get them for you. But some of them are, I honestly think I remembered
Well,
Precision telling me that.
I'll say this much because I talked to his counterpart in operations today. The inventory at that location today, sprawling over multiple offsites, was 8,200 units. The yard worked, and he said that's the highest he's had in 2024. You go back to COVID times, they were upwards of 15,000 units on the ground. So they were sprawled all over the counties, all over, Genesee County, Burton, everywhere. With the highest inventory he's seen to date, if our yard was operational today, the capacity between the assembly plant yard and our yard would hold all of that, and there would be no need for any of the other ones using that knowledge, or using those numbers. So I can say that much. And right now, I think they've got them in Sports Creek, the old raceway at Sports Creek. They've got them. They're no longer in Buick City. There are vehicles at Buick City, but those aren't storage vehicles. That's a new operational strategy down there at the old Buick City location. They ship rail out of there now, so that's a permanent play there. That's not just vehicle storage. But the airport should go away. That corner lot, my guess, Precision would probably use that for parking their own personal equipment and stuff that they use to support that corner operation. And they might also use that for like GFX overflow. I know at times they have surplus for GFX units that have been sprayed that aren't shippable yet or require upfitting at Knapheide down the road. So it could be used for those, but the goal would be to try to retain it to the 1 or 2 because they save so much money and security in other areas too.
And just to speak directly on that specific property, I have addressed Precision myself and said I'd like to keep to this plan of getting rid of all these offsites. And I said on that one specifically, I'd like to see that it goes away if possible. Now, again, I can't make them do that, but
Right.
I've
Well,
told
I'm
them.
only saying that only because it'd be really upsetting that they tore all the trees down and then it's just,
I completely
whatever it is.
agree with you.
It's very disturbing, so.
I completely agree
Yeah.
with you, and I'm sorry.
So, and also, who drives your trucks? Who hires them? Who brings the trucks into your parking lots? Who drives them? Who?
Precision
Vehicle Logistics is the company that
That's who-
and they're
okay.
called our yard manager, but they handle basically every time, as soon as the vehicle leaves the roll-up doors coming out of the facility, they're driving them and moving them from that point until they're at the dealership.
Okay, because they're pretty bad drivers. Anybody that drives that area knows, and it's not okay. So that's something that should be addressed. Let's see. I'm sorry if I wrote down a lot of notes, but it's really important to have all this. How many acres of trees you're gonna take out, and who's gonna maintain the berms? Or if the trees die, that whatever you put in, who's gonna replace them? Because I know it doesn't happen, so I'm asking for the record.
What was your question again, Barb?
Who's gonna maintain the berms and the plantings? And
Well,
if they
those
die-
would still be on our property. The stuff on the other side of the easement that we're gonna probably give to the community, that's gonna be tricky because we're gonna have a fence in between. And we can't access that. So they'll have to take care of the area they have an easement to is essentially gonna be their ground to do whatever they want with. Retain their pole barns that are there today, retain their fire pits. There's 17 structures out of 24 there today, some as large as 30 by 40 pole barns with concrete floors, real structures. So they'll be responsible to maintain that space. The space inside of our fence line we'll be maintaining.
Did you ask the question, how many acres?
Yeah, I forgot.
The development we're requesting the change on is 29. That would tie into an existing 40 that we park today for a grand total of 69 developed acres for parking vehicles.
I'm still really disappointed, and I didn't get invited to the field trip, if anybody wants to know. Other people went. Am I talking too long?
No.
We could only, we were told we could.
I'm done.
What field trip was there?
We would have gladly taken everybody, but we were told by your lawyer we could only invite 1 or 2 from each, so.
I didn't attend a field trip, so.
I would be happy to take anybody out there that is willing to go. We were told that we were only allowed to take so many, so
That's okay. I appreciate your time, but I'm done. I'm all right. I'm done.
Any other questions? Mr. Leverett, did you wanted to ask a question?
Well, I wanted to ask this question about these generators. The people had a problem with these generators before. Are we trying to get up-to-date equipment that's gonna cause
The goal, so during the
noise
site
factor?
plan, yeah, Gene, during the site planning approval process, our goal is to eliminate all those, hardwire all new, brand new LED lights that are directed away from the houses that butt into that neighborhood, and eliminate all those generator lights too. Get rid of the loud operating noise, get rid of you can't direct those as well as you can, the permanent ballast and structures, and you don't have to run diesel fuel 24/7, all the above, so get rid of them. That's the plan.
But that was one of the major complaints that the people.
Oh, yeah.
the residents
It's one of
didn't
our
like that.
conditions, so in
I
our,
see.
in our conditions, that's a contractual item we're signing up to do.
Okay.
Treasurer Klee, any questions?
No, I'm just writing, thank you.
No.
That's it. So, we have a motion and a second, and, I believe that motion was, who made the motion? Was it you, Tom? Or was it you, Greg, to approve?
Move forward and approve it.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, Madam Clerk, roll call please on the ordinance zoning amendment, PZC 23-0003, VL east of Westminster. Westminster.
Supervisor Miller?
No.
Trustee Fabdahl?
Yes.
Trustee King?
Yes.
Trustee Vert?
No.
Trustee Leverett?
Yes.
And Treasurer Clee?
Yes.
And Clerk Triplett, yes.
So that's 5-2. That motion is approved. All set? You're all set.
Thank you, have a good night.
Action item B is the 2024 Charter Township of Flint millage rates. You have before you the letter and the resolution from our assessor.
10B at the top or that one at the bottom? Page 20 at the bottom, if you're trying to get it all flipped around.
So I'll just read it quickly. Whereas the Charter Township of Flint Board has carefully examined the financial circumstances of the expenditures, estimated revenues, and taxable valuation of property located within the township for the sound management and operation of the township. And whereas the Charter Township of Flint has complete authority to establish that a maximum allowable millage of 4.6423 mils for operating, 0.5 mils for municipal street funds, 0.25 mils for fire equipment, and 3.85 mils for public safety be levied in the 2024 from within its authorized millage rates. Now therefore be it resolved that the 2024 fiscal year, the total millage rates shall be levied upon the property located within the township as followed. And as I read, 4.6423 mils of operating, that hasn't changed. 0.5 mils for municipal street funds, 0.25 mils for fire equipment, and 3.85 mils for public safety. Would someone like to make the motion to approve the resolution?
We would move to accept the resolution as presented for the 2024 Charter Township Flint millage rates.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Any questions or discussion? Madam Clerk, roll call, please, on the resolution setting the 2024 Charter Township of Flint millage rates.
Treasurer Clee?
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee King?
Yes.
Trustee Leverett?
Yes.
Clerk Triplett, yes. Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Fabdahl?
Yes.
Trustee Vert?
Yes.
Thank you. Action item C, that is the fire department budget amendment. Did you want to speak on that?
I will, yes. So as I put in my letter, this has been an unprecedented year, as have the last few within our department, with our call volume continuing to increase and the severity of calls getting worse, and trying to keep Fire Station 1 open. Our current overtime budget in the general fund is about 98% spent at this point. This coupled with more off-duty responses to calls due to having less on-call firefighters, it's just kind of the perfect storm going on here. The fire department does its best to only allow overtime to fill vacant shifts to keep fire stations open or for emergency off-duty responses. Unfortunately, our budget in 2024 just hasn't kept up. Due to the above situation, I'm requesting that the board authorize additional funds to be used in overtime to help us get through the rest of the year. As I have spoken to Supervisor Miller, we obviously cannot spend funds that are not there, that are not budgeted, and basically these funds go directly to emergency responses to fires and other calls within our community, and also keeping fire stations open. That is kind of where we're at right now. We have done everything that we can, including our assistant chief has been on 24-hour shifts off of a normal 40-hour rotation since the beginning of June. I plan to keep him in that position until probably the middle of September at this point to help cover a lot of those openings. We're doing the best that we can to be as creative as possible to fill these vacancies, keep fire stations open, but unfortunately we are just not there at this point. So that is my request. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Did we get a motion on the floor yet? Can we get a motion before we,
I'll make a motion to approve the fire department budget amendment.
is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Who had a question? Someone, did you have a question? I have a question. 25,000, did you talk with Kevin about that number?
I did not. I didn't want to bother him with everything he's had going on lately with the audit and these action plans. I basically based this off of what we've used so far this year and the number of shifts that I can kind of forecast going forward and the emergency calls. I've kind of done my best to put my thumb over this number, but that is an approximation at this point as to what we would need. I think that's more than enough to get us by. But of course, I mean, I'm not going to spend money, even if it is, budgeted, that we don't need to. Again, I try to justify every hour of overtime, every dollar, to make sure that we're doing our part to be as financially smart as possible.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. It's hard for me to say, but I'm not going to support this. I think that the supervisor, and I know one other person of the Personnel Committee, there have been suggestions made, and they haven't been applied, and that was back in January.
And there's been a lot of discussions. There's been other plans that have been brought forward that I have brought forward.
But it was a pretty easy one, and that's all I'll say. So I'm not going to support this amendment. Because I think those things need to be applied.
Any other questions? Any further discussion? No? Madam Clerk, roll call, please, on the request from Chief Beckley for the Fire Department budget amendment.
Trustee Burt?
No.
Trustee Leverett?
No.
Trustee King?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
No.
Trustee Favdar?
Yes.
Trustee Burt, you said no. Did I get everyone besides myself?
Or me?
Treasurer Clee?
Trustee.
Yes.
And Clerk Triplett?
So I guess I'm going to ask for direction then on how I'm supposed to proceed with the next 4.5 months of the year with having no money for 4 of my full-time firefighters to respond to emergency calls for service.
So I know you need overtime money. I would ask that the board would entertain a motion to, I would like to talk with Kevin, because I just pulled up the overtime report. You had budgeted 26,000 for the entire year, right?
Correct.
And you're
That is
asking-
that is in the one fund.
fund.
We do have 2 funds, which I am concerned about. I can't pick and choose.
Right, I understand.
Our
But I'm
overtime
just talking about the
utilization.
general fund
Okay.
overtime. You had a total of 26,000 for the year. Now you're asking for 25. I would move that we would approve $10,000 in overtime amendment right now and get with Kevin and bring back another request at the next meeting, because that, I know you need it. I know you need it. So I have a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I would support that motion.
Any further discussion or questions? Madam Clerk, roll call, please, on amending the fire department budget overtime in the general fund for $10,000 right now, and you'll bring back another request at the next meeting.
Trustee King?
Yes.
Treasurer Clee?
Yes.
Trustee Leverett?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Favdar?
Yes.
Clerk Triplett, yes. Trustee Burt?
No.
That motion passes.
Thank you.
Action item D is road improvement catch basin repair. You have the estimates from the Genesee County Road Commission. And these are catch basins that are problematic because they're a danger to the motoring public. And we pay, as you can see on these estimates, the township's required to pay 50%, and then the road commission pays the other 50%. And you have the list in front of you, and the total estimate of these catch basin repairs is $42,000. And since we have ARPA dollars left, and Kevin's wanting us to expend those by the end of the year, I'm asking the board to approve the expenditure with ARPA dollars, because that's one of the 4 categories you can use it on. And motion would be in order to move forward.
Make a motion to move forward.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it. Yeah, go ahead.
Any questions? You have a question?
CPD got.
Did you say it was?
42,000. That's just an estimate.
Right. And where do we get these from? Like, for instance, there's one in Hundreds Ridge that's pretty bad. It's been bad for years. So is that something they report or?
The Road Commission Swartz Creek Garage does the maintenance on all our roads. Once in a while, I'll get a complaint from a resident, and we send it over there, and they'll go look at it. But this list, all of these came from the Road Commission. They didn't, John, we didn't review these, did we? It all came from the Road Commission. If you tell me the location of that one in Hunter's Ridge that's really bad, I'll ask them to go look.
I'll get it, yeah. I was just curious. Thank you, though.
Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, roll call, please, on the approval of the catch basin repair estimates.
Trustee Fabdahl?
Yes.
Trustee Leverett?
Yes.
Trustee King?
Yes.
Trustee Burt?
Yes.
Clerk Triplett, yes. Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
And Treasurer Klee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Action item E is the Carmen 5K run. You have that information? Is anyone going to speak on that? I mean, you have the information, they're asking to have a police escort, is that right?
I think they're just asking for the police to be there when they're
Stand by.
crossing.
And to close
at
the road.
Carmen, yeah, in front of Carmen, because they're running through the neighborhood that's to the west of it. And I think that's what they were asking for.
Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to support the Carmen 5K run.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second it.
It's on September 28th. No, is that right? Yeah.
May I?
Yeah,
I can't
please.
talk yet, not until.
No, go ahead, I need some more description.
Well, it's, from what I was told and explained about this, and when I told them they need to contact you, this is to kick off homecoming week. This will kick off homecoming week that Saturday. The rest of the week is homecoming, so it's something new. They're trying to get everybody involved in the homecoming aspect.
So it's a 5K run from the high school through Dye Meadow subdivision and then back to the high school, and we need help with
Just the crossing.
closing of Linden Road, back and forth. Okay. Do we have a motion on this?
Yeah.
In a second?
Greg and
Any
Jean.
further discussion on it?
Greg and Jean.
Hearing none. All those in favor of approving this request signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That's approved. Action item F. It's all yours, Kevin. It's a action plan for the municipal street fund.
Yep, so the corrective action plan, like the auditor said, we had some issues with the audit that we are required to file a corrective action plan when you're in a deficit. And our street millage has a deficit that we need to give them a plan of how we expect to pay it back. They'd like them to have a 5-year plan, so that's what I did. This won't repay it within 5 years because it's due to the 15-year special assessment. They should understand that over time, it will get paid back and the money will be there. But this is the plan. I have to give them a 5-year plan, and then they have to approve it. But one of the things you have to do is get a board-approved budget plan. And that's what you have in front of you, is basically a 5-year projection of how the fund balance is going to become a positive, because it's negative right now.
And so you have to file this action plan with the state by August 31st?
Actually, it's August 29th. You have 30 days from the time that we
Okay.
filed the audit. So all of them are going to be due, but this one needs board approval. The other one, I need to do a corrective action to submit, but that one is not required for board approval.
Okay. So, would someone like to make the motion to move forward?
I'll move that we accept the controller's corrective action plan in order to move the street fund in a better position.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'm gonna second it.
Okay. Any questions for Controller McIntyre?
How did we get in such a deficit?
We had to borrow money from for the flagstone project. And the money, you have to pay the 50% upfront. And that 50% upfront, we originally scheduled out of general fund, but we recognized that it was going to put our general fund negative if we didn't move it to the road millage. So we moved it to the road millage, basically to not be bankrupt in the general fund.
That was at the advice of the auditors.
Yep, the auditor said that that would be the best bet since we've already went forward with the plan. You can't like stop halfway through and go, oh, we don't want to do it no more. So the best bet was to move it to the municipal street fund.
So even further back, we borrowed money to pay for the 10 special assessments on the commercial roads. And we borrowed out of sewer and water. And we've paid our 25% portion back, and a lot of the business owners have repaid that special assessment. So that was run through the general fund, correct?
Yeah.
So on this special assessment, instead of bonding, the board voted to borrow the money out of sewer and water, and you can't have that money borrowed from the sewer and water enterprise. It had to either be general fund or road millage. We had it in general fund, it put us at a negative, they recommended to put it in the road millage fund. So, the township will pay 25% of that special assessment from the road millage, and, the residents will be responsible to pay the rest over the next 15 years. That's what the board voted to do when we proceeded with their special assessment project.
So at the end of this.
Oh, sure, uh-huh. This is just a 5-year plan. That special assessment allows, this board approved a 15-year repay because there were people in the public hearing who were complaining they couldn't afford. I mean, the majority of their neighborhood wanted to move forward with this project. There was a couple people who said that is not doable for me. And rather than doing a 10-year or a 12-year repayment, the board granted a 15-year repayment. So while this is a 5-year required by the state, we're gonna have to do more of a plan for the next 10 years.
We're still gonna be doing road projects out of the village.
That's, you know what, that's a very good question, Greg. We can take all that road millage money and put it toward that, but our responsibility to that special assessment project is only 25%.
We're gonna have almost a $600,000 deficit.
You don't know that because we don't know who's gonna
I'm
pay.
just looking at what the number says right here.
Well,
And
that's
my
as
projection
today.
doesn't have any prepayment, so like
And
there's
I
going to be like,
understand that,
yeah.
but if the
Because I
projection
can't project
holds
who might
true-
pay, yes, that's correct. If nobody pays in full, that's exactly what you'll have right there.
Right.
Have we had anybody, and I don't know this, I haven't
The
heard.
project's not completed, they haven't received their
So they
bill.
haven't received their bills yet, so we don't have anybody that's tried to write us a check yet. That's what I was gonna say, I didn't think we were at the end line yet. There's just a few
No.
I've spoken-
outliers sitting there needing to be done, right?
There's 2 things that need to be finished. I've let the engineer know we need those numbers by Labor Day so that we can turn around and send a letter to all the residents. They'll receive the letter that says, here is your special assessment. You have the option to pay by Halloween, I guess. They'll receive the letter sometime in September. They'll get 30 days to pay it. And they'll have till, like I said, October 31st. If they don't pay by then, it's going to be assessed to their bill. They'll take the total of that bill and divide it by 15 with interest, right? 15 years, that amount with interest, and that will go on their tax bill every year. So, and that's how that payment's gonna work. But we haven't completed that project. There's some restoration as far as staying on two driveways and grass. And believe it or not, that is a big issue. Mary Beth, you live in that neighborhood. So when they dug up. Yep, when they dug up the concrete, of course, they have to dig up the grass. And all the residents want their grass to look like it did before they dug it up. And it doesn't at this point. And we have to make the subcontractor working with the contractor and the road commission to fix it. That's part of the restoration. And as soon as that's done, we'll know exactly how much that project cost, and we'll have a total here by Labor Day. That's the plan. Any other questions? No? We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, roll call, please, on the approval of the Municipal Street Fund Deficit Elimination Plan.
Supervisor Miller?
Yes?
Trustee King?
No.
Treasurer Clee?
Yes.
Trustee Leverett?
Yes.
Trustee Burt,
Yes.
trustee Fabdal,
Yes.
clerk Truitt, yes.
Thank you. We go on to action item G, is the Labor Day walk through the Genesee County Sheriff's Office. You have that information that was passed out at, just before the meeting. The date, what's the date on this? The date is September 2nd, and I already read the route. And I anticipate that the Sheriff's Department's gonna escort. And this is to close the roads at those locations, so a motion is in order to move forward.
Yeah, they're basically walking from like where Latina's is down there, down to the UAW. Sorry, I'm just-
Like we were saying though, this is just gonna be, I guess, a observation for us because the sheriff department probably got their own security, right?
Haven't been.
Yeah, as far as we know, they haven't consulted.
Police department in Flint Township has not been asked to staff this at this point.
So mostly, Gene, this request is to close that road
Yeah.
with a permit through the road commission. That's what this first page is.
They're gonna have their own.
Does someone want to make a motion?
I make a motion to allow police escort for September the 2nd for the parade,
The road closure.
the road closure for the parade.
Support.
That's what it's got here.
What's your question, Mr. LeBron?
It's not for escort, it's for.
It's closing the road
Police
for the
escort
walk.
parade on Monday is what it says.
Closing the road.
It's just
Does it say
approval of
how long?
permit from the road commission.
I'll second the motion by the clerk to submit the application to the Genesee County Road Commission for the road closure.
Is there a second down here?
Oh, there was? Oh, I'm sorry, Carol did.
Yeah, Carol.
My
seconded the
fault, my
motion.
fault.
It's okay. All those in favor of approving the request by the Office of Genesee County Sheriff for this permit to close the road on September 2nd, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes. Any announcements? Madam Clerk? When's our next meeting? It's off schedule because of Labor Day.
Is going to be,
And it's September 9th?
Nine.
yeah, of September.
Alrighty.
September 9th?
Is there no issues?
No.
What does it say?
Well, it does say,
Oh, they do want a police escort.
but would it be, that's what she was talking about.
That was her.
Would it be the county that would be responsible? And you don't know yet.
Again, I was just consulted about how they go about this process. I haven't had any discussion to date if we, as in your Flint Township Police Department, will have any direct involvement. I anticipate they may reach out, however, at this moment, they have not.
And you'll just work with him, whatever, right? And this, we just approved the
I think it's the sheriff's
permit, yeah.
department that's.
Yep. Alrighty.
All right, thank you.
Closing. Not the actual.
So if there's no further business, and with that objection, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
All right.